Well, welcome back everybody. My name is Sean Carmody, and I serve as the executive pastor here at Berkeley Chapel. And I would just like to take a moment to welcome any first-time guest we have with us. If this is your first time, we are honored to have you. We hope you feel right at home. In addition, if you would meet us in Guest Central, just right outside the double doors there, directly after the service, I would love to shake your hand, and we have a nice gift for you. Well, our lead pastor, Pastor Dave and Gina, they're not with us, but they send you their love. They are at a church in St. Petersburg that they founded some 30 years ago, and it's their 30-year anniversary over there, so they've been invited to come and be recognized and honored there. But if this is your first time, please try to make plans to come back next Sunday and meet him. He would love to meet you. Well, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, which isn't really a guest at all. He's a close friend of Berkeley Chapel, Dr. Bill Hackett. Let's all give him a warm Berkeley Chapel welcome.
Thanks, Sean.
Dr. Hackett has served as provost at Southeastern University for, past 10 years.
Yeah.
He's currently still one of the professors there. He loves to teach those students about Christ, so he just kept doing that. He's served every ministry position I can think of, from Sunday school teacher to pastor to provost at Southeastern. We're just really honored to have him. So give him one more warm welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Bless you, man. And thank you. That's very kind. I always feel honored to come here and speak for Pastor Dave. I love Pastor Dave, great man of God and good preacher. Amen? All right, you better say something, all right? Yeah, clap, yeah. Hey, I think it's so neat that during a worship song you have people up here ready to give you prayer. And it made me think of, this is extra, all right? There's a freebie here. It made me think of Jesus. And Jesus, I think of him in Luke 19. He's going through the town, and a tax collector, a chief tax collector named Zacchaeus, is so short, like me, had to climb up in a tree to see Jesus. And Jesus says to him, he says, I must come to your house. And he's not afraid to walk with this tax collector who Jews hated because they're collecting taxes for Rome, who's occupying the country. And Jesus is not embarrassed about what people think of him. And I just want to encourage you, and I'm sure unless you all just don't have any prayer request and your life is perfect, you just won the lottery, you just got an electric vehicle maybe, I don't know, and you're happy about that. But when you have a need, this is what these guys are up here for, and ladies. And so just encourage you, and don't care what people think, all right? Because we all need prayer. Amen? Okay, I want to I can only see shadows out here because these spotlights are in my eyes, so I'm hoping that you're there. Okay. Hey, in your bulletin, there's a little note thing here, and you might want to follow it for some of the scripture that we're going to look at. But I usually don't always start with just a particular scripture, but this one just has, it has catching power to it. All right? It draws us in because people like me have gone through times where I can relate with what David is saying, King David is saying in Psalm 13. It's only 6 verses. I'm going to read the first 4. I think the last 2 are still, I think they're all in the bulletin there. But it's a psalm of lament or complaint. And over 50% of the psalms are complaints, are lament. In other words, God's saying to us, when you're angry about something or you're frustrated with something or you don't know what's going on, you can complain to me. In fact, you can even complain about me, he's saying by these psalms. You get angry with God, he'd rather have you yell at him than yell at your spouse or kick the dog, and the dog appreciates that. Just anything along that line, complain to God. And what he's saying is we can be raw and honest with him. And he's saying let it out. And there are a number of psalms like that just, say. And so let's look at this one. It says, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? You ever felt that? How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will the enemy triumph over me? And just in 2 verses, listen to that complaint. Lord, what's going on? Why have you forsaken me? You know, we just sang songs that God will never forsake us, and yet at times we feel this. And here's David, who is described in Scripture as a man after God's own heart, went through times of trial where he was wondering, God, what's going on? Hey, will you just give light to my eyes so that I can say, I've lost the sparkle in my eye? It seems like the enemy is triumphing over me in this situation. And then in verses 3 and 4, he has his actual petition, what he's asking God for. He's done the complaint, but now he says, look on me and answer, Lord my God. Will you just look on me? You know, sometimes kids are there. Will you just, Mommy, Daddy, just pay attention to me. Just look on me and answer, right? Give light to my eyes or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. Now, I'm being honest with you. There's times when I have felt this prayer. I've prayed this prayer. Lord, what's going on in this situation? How long? It seems like what circumstances are happening in my life and things that are going on in the world and so forth. I just don't know what's happening, and I don't feel like I'm getting any response from you either. But that doesn't stop me from praying, because I know he's a faithful God in spite of the times that I feel that way at times. And so that's what I want to deal with today. I want us to look at 3 passages in the Gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. 3 stories that kind of deal with this particular thing. You'll see them in that bulletin a little bit, where we're going to talk about Jesus in the boat, Jesus on the road, and the fact that Jesus is always present with us no matter what we're experiencing. Jesus in the boat, Jesus on the road, and Jesus is always present with us no matter what we're feeling, no matter what we're seeing. He's there. And I want you to walk out of here knowing that today. There's a scholar that died a couple years ago, but he was a seminary professor in Bible and theology at Asbury Seminary. And he wrote a number of books, and he wrote in one particular book this. The book was called Shaped by the Word, and he said that we often go to the Bible as informational readers. What does he mean by that? We're looking for information about God, about life, about how we're supposed to act, about maybe even death, what's going to happen after that. And nothing wrong with that. He says, but that's the way a lot of us go. He said, we want to master the passage that we're looking at. We want to put our minds around it. We want to pull some things out. What is it trying to say? But he says sometimes we want to control it. In other words, we want to know what it says, and then we're going to decide how much of that passage are we really going to implement in our life. It's kind of like the story in Luke 10 where an expert in the law, most likely a scribe because it was the Jewish law, asked Jesus, what are the greatest commandments? And he said, well, you should know this. And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then it says that wanting to kind of qualify himself, he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? In other words, give me the boundary of who I have to be neighborly to. And I'll do that, but don't go outside that box, right? Maybe I don't want to be neighborly to a Samaritan who Jews considered a half-breed because they're half Gentile and half Jew. And so that's sometimes where we want to control the passage and put limits on it and don't let God tell us more. All right? You with me on that? Make sense? And so what I want you to do is not become just an informational reader today. I want you to be what Mulholland calls a formational reader. In other words, how is this scripture forming my life, the changes I need to make? I've been a Christian for a long time, but there's still times, things that I'm struggling with. Some things I turned around, did 180 right away, and other things I'm still working on. Maybe I'm here, maybe I'm here, maybe I'm down here. And God help me to work on these things because I want to become more like Christ. And Lord, I need work in a lot of places. Ignatius of Loyola, who was a 15th century convert, when he became a believer, he thought of this. He says, when I read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, I put myself in the story as if I was one of the people observing, or I'm one of the disciples, or I'm Zacchaeus. And he's saying, what would I hear if I was in the story? What would I see? What would be my perspective? What would I be feeling? What would I be smelling? We even at times call that inductive Bible study, that you ask the questions of your senses and you put yourself in the story. And that's what I want you to do, if you would today. As I tell these 3 different stories in the 3 different Gospels, I want you to put yourself in a story. And the character that I want you to be, I want you to put yourself in the story as one of the disciples. Feel what they were feeling. Hear what they're saying. Would you be saying the same thing? Kind of see what they would be seeing. All right, you with me on that? That's a challenge today. So let's look at the first story and see how it goes. The first one is about Jesus in the boat. We're looking at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. There it is on the board. No, we're still, okay, there it is. Good, all right? And so it says this, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side. Now, they're on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, and they're going to go over the eastern shore and speak. And he's going to spend a little bit of time in there in chapter 4 and chapter 5. And it says, verse 36, leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And there was no other, there were also other boats with him. And look at verse 37. A furious squall came up. All right? A squall was what? A severe storm, rain, thunder, winds, lightning, everything. And the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Now, let's just pause there for a minute. Here we have all the disciples and Jesus in a boat, and this story comes up. And I think at times we've all perhaps have seen a squall. I can remember last spring, and I live here in Auburndale. I live on Lake Arietta. And I remember there was a day that my neighbor was having a party. It was a Saturday, and he had, little canopies up and the barbecue out, and he had people fishing off his dock and swimming and so forth. And all of a sudden, the clouds came up, and it got dark, and you could see it coming, and the wind started to pick up. And it got so bad, they're rushing stuff into the house, but one of their canopies is flying over the fence into my yard, and just, it was a rough storm. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, if you live in Auburndale, we felt the same thing. It was just a terrible wind. I thought, man. And they said it was up to 50-mile-an-hour winds. And it was just blowing, unbelievable. And living on a lake, I can see at times the storm just coming across. All right? I don't know if you've ever experienced that on the ocean or on the bay or something like that. And you just watch the rain coming across, and you can see it, how it affects the water at that time. It's kind of neat, but it's also kind of scary. And remember that 3 of the disciples, 3 of them, are professional fishermen. They've grown up in this business. Probably they're taking over the family business. Peter, James, and John, who Jesus calls out of fishing for fish to fish for men, for people. And 3 of them and they have probably been out on the Sea of Galilee probably thousands of times. Probably when their father was doing the business, they were a small boy and growing up, and now they're running the business type of thing. And yet they're terrified, right? Water's coming in on the boat, or they're going to sink. This is a bad one. I can remember my wife and I visiting Israel and taking a boat trip across the Sea of Galilee, which is it's bigger than any lake we have in Auburndale, and just going through it. And the captain of the boat telling us, man, when a storm comes up on this lake, this sea, and that's why they refer to it sometimes as a sea rather than a lake, they said it gets scary in those times. So I can kind of relate with this story when he's saying that. And look what Jesus is doing in verse 38. He's in the stern, the back of the boat, sleeping on a cushion. You got to tell me that Jesus is relaxed, that a storm is coming up, your disciples are freaking out, the boat's about to sink, and Jesus is sleeping. Man, I wish I could sleep like that. Sleep through a storm. And so they come over, right? The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" That's kind of a fascinating statement to say to him. And he got up and he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down and it was completely calm. Wow, that quick. And he said to his disciples in verse 40, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Underline that. Do you still have no faith? And they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Now, why is Jesus able to sleep in the midst of a storm? And then why does he ask him, "Do you still have no faith?" Well, we have to remember, they're trying to figure out this God-man. Is he the real deal? Is he the Messiah? Is he the Christ, the anointed one that we're looking for, that is going to change history, that's going to do away with the captivity that we're now in under Rome in our own country? Is he the one who's going to make things right and make the crooked places smooth and just fix everything? That was their idea of what the Messiah would do. He's going to get it back to what it was like in the Garden of Eden. He's going to fix this. And Jesus doesn't, it fits and he doesn't fit our expectations at times. I mean, sometimes we see him do miracles, we see him cast out demons, but then, what's going on here? Don't you even care that we might drown? And then he does something, and well, maybe he is the guy. But Jesus said to him, do you still have no faith? In other words, he's saying, I'm the creator. John 1 says what? In the beginning was the Word, or Jesus, and the Word, Jesus, was with God, and the Word, Jesus, was God. And through him, all things were created. Why is Jesus able to sleep on a pillow in a boat in the midst of a storm? Because he knows he can handle it. He created storms. He can stop them at any time he wants. Don't you have faith yet of this person that stands before you? I am the Messiah. I and the Father are one. I am God. There's just haven't really thought about it. And I wonder at times if we are in the same place. I wonder at times when we're going through a storm and we wonder where Jesus is. Is he sleeping? How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever and hide your face from me? Will you just look on me? Jesus, are you sleeping? I'm going through this terrible crisis right now. It's a storm. My marriage is broken up. My son died. God, what's happening here? Where are you? Why would you let something like this happen? This is a storm. Where are you in this crisis? I'm not seeing anything. I'm not hearing anything. Sometimes we sing a chorus called The Waymaker. Even though I don't see it, you're working. Even though I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. Do we really understand what we're saying when we sing that part of the chorus? Do we really remember that he's working even when we don't see it or feel it? He's the creator. He created marriages. He created us. He created things that he can solve and resolve because that's who he is. Jesus is always in the boat with us. He's not going to let us sink. He's in the boat with us. That's what he's trying to say. All right, let's go to a second story. This is the one where Jesus is on the road. It's in Luke chapter 24. It's the last chapter in Luke's gospel. Jesus has been arrested. He's crucified. He's been buried. And now a couple of disciples are walking on the road, and they're trying to figure out what's happening. So let's read it. It says, Jesus is on the road with us, all right? Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But look at verse 16. But they were kept from recognizing him. They were kept from recognizing. I don't know if Jesus did that or out of their own blindness and preoccupation with what's going on, that they did not recognize that this was Jesus. And I kind of feel it's that last one. It wasn't Jesus doing it, it was them. Because they were so preoccupied with what was going on. And so what does he ask? He asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? And they stood still. It's almost like, wow, you don't know? Their faces downcast. Another translation says they were looking sad and gloomy. And one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days? And Jesus plays along, okay, what things? About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He's a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and all rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But look at verse 21. But we had hoped. We had hoped. In other words, their hope is gone. We had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel, be the Messiah. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb of Jesus this morning, and they didn't find the body. They came in and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Okay, can we trust this witness? You know, did they have something to drink before they went there? Were they smoking a joint? You know, did they really see this? Did they really see an angel? But then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. What is God doing in this situation? We had great hope in this, in our Christian walk and what was going on, and all of a sudden this is happening. God, what are you doing? You know, if I was God, I would work this way. That's what we often do. God should have done it this way. God created us in our image, and we return the favor. We create God the way we want him, in our image. All right? Now, I said that wrong the first time. God created us in his image, but we try to create him in our image and make him be the God that we want him to be and not allow him to be God. And that's their biggest frustration with the Messiah. He fits, but he doesn't fit. We think he's supposed to do this, and he doesn't do this. And we don't understand what's going on here. And they're confused. They're baffled. They're perplexed. Why is this happening? Why has this happening? What's going on? It's almost like being in the boot. But here is Jesus in the situation, listening to them. So, you know, and he eventually makes himself known if you read on. But there are times that we become puzzled and perplexed with why certain things have happened, their confusion. We didn't expect things to happen that way. And we become gloomy. And our hopes could be shattered in that situation. Yet here is Jesus walking right beside them. And they don't recognize it till later when he breaks bread with them. We at times don't realize that while we're walking the road of confusion and disappointment and perplexment, that Jesus could be there right there with us. He is there right there with us. This is what Tim Keller says, pastor in New York who's written a number of books, and he writes a book called God's Wisdom, which is a devotional that goes through the book of Proverbs. And he says this: the temptation for those who suffer is to assume that because we can't think of any good purposes God would have for our suffering, when there can't be any. I can't think of any good purpose for this, so there must not be any. Why would God allow this to happen? I'll say that again. The temptation for those who suffer is to assume that because we can't think of any good purposes God would have for our suffering, there can't be any. And Tim goes on to say, if you can't imagine a God who is infinitely wiser and more loving than you, then you won't be able to trust him and grow in faith. Now, do we today believe that God is infinitely wiser than us and more loving than us? I mean, that's a step of faith to believe that. Do we believe that's the God that we serve? And that even though we don't see it, he's working. And even though we don't feel it, He's working. Did you ever take Romans 8:28? All things work together for good for those who love God and called according to his purpose. All things, not some things, all things. Do we believe there's good in this situation? It's tough sometimes when you don't know why these all things are going on. Why is this happening? God, where are you? Why is this happening? Do we have faith that he's a good God and good is going to come out? It might not, do we have enough faith that we might not see it in our lifetime? I'm here because of the prayers of my grandfather. He died before I became a Christ follower. But his life and his testimony led me to the Holy Spirit and accepting God in my life. I was able to lead his 2 sons to the Lord. When he died, none of his children, none of his grandchildren were believers. And he didn't see it. But one day he's going to see it, if he doesn't already see it. But he didn't see it in this lifetime. All things work together for good. His testimony, his lifestyle drew me to Jesus. We might not see what's going on in a situation, but do we trust God that all things work together for good? Last point. Jesus is always present with us. And this brings us to a story in Matthew. Again, we're dealing with disciples in a boat on the Sea of Galilee. But this is a little different because this time Jesus is not with them. Hey, you know the story. You might be familiar in Matthew 14:22-27. It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. Again, they're on the western shore. They're going to the eastern shore. When he dismissed the crowd, and after he had dismissed them, he went up to the mountaintop to pray. And later that night, he was there alone. Where are they? They were out on the sea. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land. Again, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Another storm. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said. And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Now I'm going to give you a little lesson in New Testament Greek this morning. You ready for that? A little lesson in New Testament Greek. You're going to walk out of here a Greek scholar. All right? I want to take that phrase, it is I, and I want to give you a more literal translation of it. All right? But I'm going to give you the words first. That phrase, it is I, is ego, that's the way it's pronounced in Greek, eimi. Ego, eimi. Let's pronounce this in English. Ego. Ego. It's a pronoun. First person singular, I. Eimi is the be verb. And it's first person singular because you look at the ending, it tells you whether it's first person, second, or third, or so forth. But you look at the ending. Spanish is like that. Many languages are like that. You just look at the ending or the beginning of it, the prefix, the suffix, and you'll understand what the word is. All by itself, eimi means I am. So why do you have this ego, eimi? Why do you have I am? That doesn't make sense. Well, in Greek, there's a rule that if you have a word that, like this one, first person singular or second or whatever it is, but this is first person singular, and you put that pronoun that agrees with it. This is first person singular, this is first person singular, and it agrees with it. It's there for emphatic purposes. What does that mean? It's there to emphasize the I am. So Jesus is saying, don't be afraid, I am. Now you say, what's the big deal with that, Hackett? Well, if you go back to the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which is actually the one that Jesus quoted from, because it was more people knew it. It was a universal language. And if you go back to Exodus chapter 3, verse 17, If you're familiar with that passage, it's this. There was Moses, who is being a shepherd for 40 years. He grew up in Egypt in Pharaoh's house, got an education, but one day, when he's 40 years old, he sees a Jewish slave being beaten up by an Egyptian, and he goes up and interferes and breaks it up and ends up with a fight with the Egyptian, and he kills him. And so he leaves Egypt, flees for his life, goes into the wilderness, becomes a shepherd. And now he sees this burning bush that it's burning, but it's not burning up. It's not the fire is not consuming the bush, but the bush is on fire. And he walks over to see it, and all of a sudden he hears a voice say, "Take off your shoes, you're standing on holy ground." God talks to him and he says, "Moses, I'm calling you to go back to Egypt and lead your Jewish people who have become slaves in Egypt. You're going to lead them to freedom. You're going to lead them out into the promised land." And Moses gives all sorts of excuses. "I'm not the best speaker. I didn't take public speaking. Dr. Hackett, I just failed that class," and so forth. But he gets to a place where he says to God, "Who shall I say sent me?" And it's written in the Septuagint, in this particular verse, it says, "Tell them, ego eimi." Tell them, "I am." Just tell them, "I am." Emphatic again. Now, just to add on to that, if you go to John's Gospel, you have 7 different "I am" statements. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the gate to the sheep. I am the light of the world. But there's one place in John 8:58 that Jesus is arguing with the Jewish rulers and so forth, and he finally makes this statement: before Abraham, father of the Jewish nation, before Abraham was, I am. He doesn't add anything onto that. It's emphatic. And they know from Exodus 3:17, he's calling himself God. They're ready to kill him. They're ready to throw him off the cliff because they're in Nazareth. And he walks through the crowd because it's not his time, and he gets away. And so this is a powerful statement when he's saying, I am God. I'm here. Now, what does that mean? It means that God is always present. I am. He's not a past. He's not a future. He is always present no matter what age we look at. He is present in that time. He's going to be present with us tomorrow and the next day and 20 years from now and 40 years from now, just as he was present 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago. He is always the I am, present in every situation. But when we accept Jesus into our life and we have the Holy Spirit come in, we have that abiding presence in us because he makes us collectively and singly the temple of the Holy Spirit. So if you're a follower of Christ and you've asked him to come into your life, guess what? He is in your life. He's not sleeping on a pillow in a boat, not paying attention. He is there. He's just not walking along the road. He is there with us. I get so frustrated when on a Monday morning I'll ask students, well, how did your weekend go? Man, we were at church and God showed up. Was he on vacation? Did he have COVID? I mean, what's the deal? God is always there. You showed up to the fact that he's in you. And he's here. He is present right now. And no matter what you're going through, the storms of life, the confusion, the experiences that are there, he is there in those situations. You might not see him, but he's working. You might not feel him, but he's working. Because that's the faithfulness of God. He will never leave us or forsake us unless we throw him out. But he will be there because he doesn't give up on us. Often we give up on him. He is always there. So here's the deal. This is what I want you to do. Kind of a homework assignment for you. All right? There's a passage in that handout in your bulletin from Psalm 46, verse 10. And I'd encourage you, before you even do this, read Psalm 46. It's only 11 verses. But it's a great verse for the times that we live in. He says, hey, whether they're hurricanes, if they're storms, earthquakes, whatever it's going to be, God's in control. And it also says when there's wars and famine and so forth, God's in control. But in verse 10a, it says this, be still and know that I am God. And sometimes that means shutting down your phone, not looking at your texts. Be still and know that I am God. And so here's the exercise. It only takes you 12 minutes if you do it right. It only takes you 12 minutes. And you can do it while you're driving your car. You can do it when you're going to work, going to school, whatever it is. You can do it when after a meal. You can do it in the morning before you get out of bed. You can do it at night before you go to sleep. Maybe it'll actually help you go to sleep. And you do this. I want you to take 2 minutes on be still and know that I am God. In fact, interesting enough, that I am is an ego eimi. Be still and know that I am God. And maybe say it a couple times. It's called contemplative prayer. Say it a couple times. Just repeat it. And maybe you ask, gosh, what do you want me to do from this? What do you want to tell me? And just maybe have a little bit of the time in that 2 minutes to listen. Next 2 minutes. Be still and know that I am. We took the word God off of there. Be still and know that I am. Repeat that. Just kind of focus on that. And maybe the Holy Spirit's going to fill in there. I am loving. I am faithful. I am with you. See what he does. Next 2 minutes. Be still and know that I. Say that a couple times. 2 minutes. Maybe God's going to say, I love you. I care about you. I forgive you. I'm here for you. Next 2 minutes. Be still and know. Be still and know. Is there something you want me to know, God? Yes, you are my child. You're a favorite for me. I don't know what he's going to do in that time. And that's why I say do it a couple of different times and see how God responds when you take 12 minutes of your day to do this. Be still and know. Be still. That's a tough one for us. 2 minutes on that. Just be still. Maybe you're even asking him at that time, why are you asking me to be still in this? Because you need a break. You need to just rest your mind. And then the last one, be. Be. Maybe you ask yourself, what do I want to be? God, what do you want me to be? Why did you put me here on planet Earth? Be. Now, I'm going to challenge, how many are willing to do that? Yeah, just put your hand up. Just give it a shot. Right? It's scary. I'm seeing you, someone way down here because, okay. Right? Now, God saw you put your hand up. Okay, they're good, so I got you now. If I was coming back next week, I'd see how you did. All right? So think about that. But I challenge you with that. At last, I want to read something to you that kind of fits. I read this the other day. This is one of the devotionals I read every day. It's written by Sarah Young. Interesting book, Jesus Calling. And she writes from the perspective that in every single page where there's a devotion, she writes as if God was talking to us. And so I love it that way. So I'm going to find my spot here. All right, there it is. Get my glasses on. And I read this the other day, and I'm working on this message, and I said, wow, God, you give me stuff to preach. Right, God talking to us. Seek me with your whole being. I desire to be found by you, and I orchestrate the events of your life with that purpose in mind. When things go well, you are blessed. You can feel me smiling on you. When you encounter rough patches along your life journey, trust that my light is still shining upon you. My reasons for allowing these adversities may be shrouded in mystery, but my continual presence with you is an absolute promise. Seek me in good times. Seek me in hard times. You will find me by watching over you. You will find me watching over you all the time. I am with you. I am ever present. Amen? Let's pray. I want to pray for you.